Hey guys, I want to welcome you to the show. This is the very first episode of Crime Talk Radio, episode numero uno. So we just want to say thank you guys for tuning in. I am your host, JD, and I cannot tell you how excited we are to get the chance to talk with you today.
Before we get too far into it, a little bit about Crime Talk Radio. We are a bi-weekly true crime podcast bringing you coverage of unsolved cases from around the world.
Danielle and I attempt to investigate the leads, track down the evidence, and search for the truth. Our only goal is to be a voice for those whose voice has been taken and to make sure that people hear their names. So we will continue to talk until all of their stories are told. Our episodes may contain graphic content about cases that may be hard to listen to for some listeners, so listener discretion is advised.
Now, our first several cases are local to us, and they're cases that we feel personally invested in. After that, we will be covering cases from all over. Let's go ahead and talk about today's case.
All right. Well, if you're ready, Danielle, let's tell our first story. The story that you're about to hear is one that has hung over the small river town of Cape Girardeau, Missouri for 38 years. Like a black cloud off in the distance, always lurking in the background, but far enough away to be quickly forgotten, this case can easily be described as one that tests the limits of the imagination. This is the story of a case full of witnesses, full of evidence, full of clues to follow, and yet for 38 years has always gone unsolved. This is the story of the murder of Deborah Manning.
We will continue to keep you informed as this story unfolds.
Deborah Manning was born on September 16th, 1955, in Topeka, Kansas. Our story starts on July 4th, 1983, and Deborah is a recently divorced mother of three who has just moved to the Cape Girardeau, Missouri area several months ago. She has a small apartment at 401 South Pacific Street and works as a maid for her stepfather's motel, the Sunny Hill Motor Inn, at the corner of West End and Independence Street. Deborah's three children, Rodney, Brandon, and Amanda, live with their father and recent ex-husband, Jimmy Manning. On the afternoon of July 4th, a holiday celebration is planned at Deborah's parents' house at 375 Nancy Street. Deborah leaves her car at home and catches a ride to her parents' house. The celebration that's taking place isn't a tiny gathering, and it sounds like there's a decent number of people there, family, and friends, including Deborah's ex-husband, Jimmy Manning. And from everyone we've talked to, things seem to be going well that night too. Everyone seemed to be having a good time. That is, until shortly before 10 p.m. At some point, Deborah has talked to some friends across the river in Illinois and makes the decision to go over there. Cape Girardeau is a river town bordering the Mississippi River, and driving across the bridge into Illinois is just a few minutes' trip. It's hard to know exactly what was said and exactly what took place, but newspaper reports from the time indicate an argument of some sort breaks out, enough so that ex-husband Jimmy Manning even gets involved. It sounds like things get a little heated, and Deborah just walks off on foot and leaves the house. So this is a little before 10 p.m., and Deborah just walks away. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly where Deborah was headed that night when she walked away from her parents' house. In an article in the Southeast Missourian newspaper from the time, Cape Girardeau County Sheriff Herman Bob Gribler was quoted as saying, "Family members told officers they did not know how she left the home or where she was going. While we don't know exactly where Deborah was going at this point, the one thing we do know is this: her leaving her parents' house that night is the last time that anyone in Deborah's family would ever see her alive again." At this point, it's just after 10 p.m., and once Deborah leaves her parents' home, no one knows where she is. So she could already be considered missing at this point, but no one knows it yet. And that's one of those things that makes this story so crazy. This isn't some missing persons cold case where we wait and wait and wait for leads. No one knows what happened. Where is she? We actually find out the what of what happened to Deborah shockingly fast, because two local men are about to make a discovery that will leave the entire southeast Missouri area in horror. At 12:30 a.m. on the morning of July 5th, just 2.5 hours since Deborah walked away from her parents' house, off-duty Chaffee police officer Richard McCall and his brother are driving down a small, dark county farm road, County Road 249, between Chaffee and Delta, Missouri, roughly 12 miles from Deborah's parents' home. And in their headlights, they see something that makes them come to a stop, dead in their tracks. In front of them, off in a small drainage ditch, was the body of a nude and bloody woman. Former officer Richard McCall is quoted as saying, "We saw it was a body. My brother wanted to stop. I said, no, we're gonna wait. We didn't have any way of defending ourselves if they were still there." Now, this is a time before cell phones too. So it's 1983. They can't just call 911 from right there. So they drive as fast as they can to get to town to use a payphone to call the sheriff's department. They lead police officers to the county road and then to where they say they found the body. What police find is a very brutal and bloody scene. The body they find is that of a nude woman who has been viciously murdered. One police officer told a reporter she had upwards of 30 injuries to her body, throat cut, stab wounds. It was very brutal and violent. One thing I'll note, the number of stab wounds I'm being told was exactly 27, and she had multiple bite marks on her breast. Police immediately begin their investigation, calling in backup, looking for clues at the scene. And one thing in particular is brought to their attention almost immediately. Former officer Richard McCall, one of the men who found her body, tells police that her body isn't actually where it was found, and it isn't actually where it was when they saw it last. It is determined by police that she was actually still alive when she was first seen laying on the ditch on the side of the road. After the two men drove off to go for help, with what last bit of strength Deborah had left, she had crawled several feet out of the ditch and onto the road. McCall stated, "It was a good 2 feet from where she was at. She was further down in the ditch when we seen her, and at the time we got back, she was almost in the road. If I knew she was alive, I would have stopped." Now at this point, police continue to investigate the crime scene and try to identify who this girl is. And it doesn't take them long, because early that morning of July 5th, they have to deliver the life-changing news to Deborah's family. Deborah's daughter Amanda, 5 at the time, was quoted as saying this, "I remember being at my grandma's house on July 4th doing the celebration, and I just remember us going home with Dad that night, and the next morning coming back, and as soon as we got back in the door, my aunt grabbed me." As soon as morning breaks and news begins to spread around the area about what has happened, leads begin coming in very quickly. Things heat up fast. For the police, tire tracks believed to belong to a vehicle involved in her murder are located in the mud and gravel where her body was found. Sometime early that morning, some of her clothes were found scattered along Road EE, running south towards Chaffee. Now this is big because the clothes were found strung along the right side of the road, almost as if they were thrown out of the passenger side of a vehicle. That and other things collected at the scene give police the working theory that it may have been 2 people involved in her murder. From the crime scene, police start to quickly find clues that really look promising. And then several people come forward claiming to have seen Deborah around the time that she had left her parents' house, walking near the intersection of Bloomfield Road and Kings Highway, headed in a direction that would indicate that she may have been walking towards her apartment. Now, this is huge information as it gives police confirmed statements from witnesses seeing her alive after she left her parents' house. Her apartment is only about 2 miles distance from her parents' house, so it's not a stretch to imagine her deciding to walk home. But the tip that comes in next changes everything about the entire investigation and affects the case for decades to come. A tip comes in that Deborah was seen at a local bar known as the Candlewick Bar and Lounge, which was only about a mile from her parents' house. The witness told police that not only was Deborah at this bar, this person remembered seeing her leave with two men. This changes everything. Police now have something solid, a lead to pursue, and they pursue it very fast. They go to the bar, the Candlewick Lounge, and begin interviewing potential witnesses. And it seems at first like a huge break in the case. Not only did the one person who had already come forward from there see Deborah, several others who were at the Candlewick Bar claimed to have seen her there that night before as well. This is a huge break in the case, and the police very quickly bring in the two men allegedly seen leaving the bar with Deborah and begin the process of questioning them. So this is a big moment in the case. We've got two men seen leaving the bar with Deborah, and now they're in custody being questioned in her murder. This is a big moment, so big in fact that it causes law enforcement to make a decision that will end up being something that everyone involved in the case comes to regret for decades. Months before Deborah's murder, several local counties had come together to form the SEMO Major Case Squad, a squad whose sole purpose would be to help with cases just like this. Their SEMO Major Case Squad website says this: law enforcement officials joined together in 1983 to form the Cape Girardeau Major Case Squad. The squad combines the best criminal investigators from all local law enforcement agencies into one organized unit. Understanding that most homicides must be solved in the first few hours or they may not be solved at all, the Major Case Squad allows local law enforcement agencies to pool investigative resources and manpower in an efficient and effective manner to provide the type of saturation investigation often essential in solving major crimes. So this squad is formed literally months before just for this sort of crime. Sheriff Bob Gribbler, Cape Girardeau County Sheriff, decides not to activate the Major Case Squad. The main reason that this is so critical in this case is that he won't have the opportunity again. In the procedures for the activation of Squad tab of the Major Case Squad website, it says this: any activation of Major Case Squad should come as soon as possible after the requesting jurisdiction learns of the crime. Except under most unusual circumstances, a request received more than 8 hours after discovery of a crime will be sufficient grounds to withhold squad assistance. And while we can only assume the reasons why Sheriff Gribbler would fail to call together this unbelievable tool that he could have had at his disposal, by all rights, Deborah's murder should have been the Major Case Squad's very first case. And maybe if it had, things could have been very different. Maybe if it had, things wouldn't have gotten so out of control. Because in the late afternoon of July 5th and into the night, things begin to completely fall apart with the investigation. As police continue to talk with the multiple witnesses from the bar that night, the more a sense of unease starts to creep in, because they are noticing that a pattern is emerging. For every person that makes a statement, someone else gives one that refutes it. For every corroborated statement, there's one that says that that wasn't possible. And this keeps happening with everyone police speak to about that night. Nothing seems to quite fit together. And I can imagine that this has to be about the moment that Sheriff Gribbler begins to wish that he had called in the Major Case Squad, because it begins to look even worse and worse for the investigation. The two men who she was allegedly seen leaving with, we do not have enough evidence to hold them, and they have to be let go. With that gone, the police are almost back to square one. But the two men are still good suspects. We just don't have quite enough to charge them with at this point. But we do have other evidence still, and that's what police begin to focus on. They've got some of her clothes that they found thrown along the side of the road. They have the tire track marks of the vehicle that they think may be involved. And so they still have a lot of things to investigate in this case. And they continue to investigate people in the case. And on Thursday, July 7th, a tip comes in that looks very promising. An abandoned car was found on a dirt road just off of Highway C in the small farming community of Greenbrier. This is roughly 12 miles from where Deborah's body was found. The man who reported the car to police had actually seen the car abandoned there 2 days earlier on Tuesday, the day Deborah was murdered. Now, I've been told that it was actually a popular fishing spot at the time, so it wasn't that odd to see cars parked there. So this guy doesn't think much of it until Thursday, July 7th. It's still there. This time, he decides to walk up to the car and get a closer look. What he sees shocks him because he's heard of the unsolved murder of a young woman. As he approaches the car, on the ground lying next to it, he sees what looks to be a bloody knife. And when he looks in the car, he sees what look to be bloodstains on the seats. Now, when the police arrive, they see exactly what the man claims. They see a car, a green 1973 Monte Carlo with no license plates, a bloody knife lying on the ground, and several stains that appear to be blood on the interior of the vehicle. When officers run the VIN of the car, they find out that it was actually stolen from a body shop in West Frankfort, Illinois, Sunday, July the 3rd. So for this investigation, this has to feel like a pretty good lead, but it's just another piece of evidence. We've still got 2 prime suspects, and this is just another layer that may or may not be connected. Sheriff Bob Gribler said this: "I won't characterize this as a strong lead. It's just another possibility which has come up and which we're investigating. The fact that it was stolen on Sunday and driven through our area and then discovered here on Tuesday is something which must be checked out." So police gather everything that could be possible evidence to be sent off to the SEMO crime lab while they continue the rest of their investigation. And as the days begin to turn into a week, and then 2, a new theory begins to shape the case. Law enforcement begin to believe that maybe it just wasn't a coincidence that all of these witness statements weren't adding up. Maybe it wasn't just a bunch of drunk people at the bar who didn't quite remember what had taken place. Maybe it just wasn't the confusion of the moment that was causing there to be such a conflict in what was being said. They begin to believe that some people were intentionally being untruthful. So much so, in fact, that the next real break in the case comes when an arrest is made. On July 25th, police actually make an arrest in the case, but not for murder. Police arrest a woman, a Sheila Spradling, on a charge of making false declarations in Deborah's murder case. Now, I had told you earlier that police were beginning to believe that people were intentionally hiding information from them or not being honest with them. So this really ties into that. But I want to pause for a moment and tell you a few things. Things I didn't mention before because I didn't want to taint your reaction to this Sheila Spradling being arrested for making false statements. But I want to tell you quickly about the exact state of the investigation immediately leading up to the arrest of Sheila. See, by this moment, the investigation was pretty much at a standstill. Actually, a good word for it would be a point of desperation, because every single piece of evidence that had looked to have promise had failed to materialize anything meaningful for the case. The tire tracks in the mud where the body was found, they were found to be made by custom tires, and so they were impossible to track. The stolen car and the bloody knife, they found out that it had nothing to do with the case. It was fish blood on the knife and in the car. Forensically, everything they had found had come to a crashing dead end. And they still were not able to corroborate enough of the witness statements to in any way have enough to charge the 2 men that she was allegedly seen leaving the bar with. So at this moment, the police really are at a point of desperation. They really don't have much, and almost everyone still feels that there's something to this bar story. Between all of the conflicting stories, there had to be some portion of truth, and that is when they decide to arrest Sheila. And she's actually released to await trial the very next day, July 26th. The same day, Sheriff Bob Gribler asked presiding circuit judge Stanley Grimm to impanel a grand jury to help investigate the murder case. In his letter to the judge requesting the grand jury, Sheriff Bob Gribler said one of the reasons he would like for a grand jury to investigate the case is because some of the statements from people questioned by investigators have been conflicting and, quote, "We have been unable to resolve the conflicting statements." The police continue their investigation, and on Monday, August the 8th, just a little over a month after Deborah's murder, the grand jury convenes and begins to investigate her case. In convening the grand jury of 2 women and 2 men, presiding Judge Stanley Grimm did not mention the unsolved murder specifically, but he had this to say to the jurors. "The court charges you to investigate and return indictments for the violation of all character and grades of crime if you find just grounds and reasonable cause upon which to base such indictments." He then told the jurors they should deal sternly with any person, officer or citizen, where you feel that he or she is not being honest and sincere with you. Now, the term for a grand jury like this is 3 months. This grand jury met 12 times in that 3-month span. 12 may not seem like many, but that's a 3-month period. And what's typical for juries like this of the past is to have met 6 times. So they're actually meeting double the amount of times as is normal. Cape County prosecutor Larry Farrell said this of the grand jury: "We met 12 times, and many of the sessions went late into the night, and on more than one occasion into the early morning hours. We interviewed tons of witnesses in the Manning case, and we questioned many of the witnesses multiple times. The grand jury's power of subpoena was utilized and was productive." So these guys really dug into this. They put a ton into trying to find the truth. And when it was all said and done, when the jury disbanded, there were 0 new indictments handed out. No new arrests were made. And the charges against Sheila Spradling were completely dropped as well. Prosecutor Larry Farrell once again had this to say: "Of course we're disappointed. Everyone was optimistic that something would come out of the grand jury and we'd be able to get indictments in the case. But I think the grand jury was still a success. It uncovered a lot of evidence and valuable information in the case. It definitely took the investigation a big step forward." If that's true, that the grand jury did in fact take the investigation a big step forward, then it's the last step forward that this case will take for decades. After the grand jury disbands, this case goes completely cold. It just stops dead in its tracks. No witnesses are talking, no new leads are coming in. It just goes quiet for so long. Every once in a while, there would be a newspaper article, an anniversary here and there, but just nothing of substance to in any way move the case forward. But just like we've seen with many of the cases we've worked on leading up to this, science has changed everything. DNA. Things that these guys who did these type of things back in '83 weren't even thinking about. And in the early 2000s, detectives are totally aware of these changes and these new techniques. The Cape Girardeau Sheriff's Department decides to re-examine the few pieces of physical evidence remaining in the case. They go over her clothes that were thrown along the side of the road, and on her panties, they find fluid specks that could be saliva, blood, or semen, and could contain the DNA of Deborah's killers. So they take these new samples, along with blood, hair, and saliva samples in for DNA testing. They also had the bite marks that were found on her breasts examined by a forensic odontologist to be compared to the dental cast they had taken from suspects in the case. Now, I know how exciting DNA technology can be, and we know that right now it is the season of justice. But in 2003, it was not. And one thing you will notice with this case that happens over and over again is that it just feels like anytime something happens to give you some hope that it's going to be solved, something happens that stops it and takes you 2 steps back. And that's what happens here. Because we just never hear anything about this again, it can only be assumed that there were no matches to any of the suspects checked by law enforcement, as the sheriff's department has only ever confirmed that, quote, if we had a match, we'd have an arrest. And as of even now, in July of 2021, an arrest has never been made for the murder of Deborah Manning. Every few years, a new article will come out in the newspaper, usually around the July 4th anniversary. I know in 2007, CJ Cassidy did a story with extensive coverage of the case, and I'm hearing that she actually uncovered new evidence. But I can only assume that it was circumstantial as well, as even now, there's still never been an arrest in this case. In 2013, Crystal Britt of KFVS 12 News also did a story that was very well put together. But that's pretty much where the case is today. The murder of Deborah Manning is a cold case that is in desperate need of a thaw, not just another July 4th anniversary newspaper article.
All right, this is the talk portion of Crime Talk Radio. Danielle, I'm going to give my first thoughts. I think in any kind of case like this, you almost have to look at the spouse. It's almost always the spouse, okay? In a case like this especially, Deborah has recently went through a divorce. I mean, it sounds like the family dynamic was good, but still, it is a recent divorce. And statistics show that it's almost always the spouse. What do you think?
I just feel like for them to be at this event together, it doesn't make sense. I can't see what the motive would be. If the divorce is already finalized, they seem to be on good terms. They're at a family function together with extended family. What would the motive be? What is he going to gain from taking her out of the picture?
Right. Well, could he be? Could he even? Like, I don't think he could have. Like, I mean, he's got, literally, we have multiple witnesses at a gas station that he stopped on his way to home. Was it Charleston?
In the Charleston area.
He's headed home towards Charleston, right. He's headed home towards Charleston. He stops at a gas station. I don't know if he knew the attendant, but he talks to this attendant for like 15 minutes. And there's multiple witnesses who saw him talking to this person at a gas station. And the kids. Amanda, Brandon, and Rodney went home with him that night, too. So, I mean, he lives in Charleston. They're actually headed the opposite direction of where her body's even found.
Right.
Yeah. And honestly, everything that I've seen, I think this is a theory that we can discount really, really quickly. I know what the statistics say. I know it's like, 70-something% of husbands and wives and yeah. I totally get it. But this is just one that there's nothing to that. It's the easiest one I've seen. Everything that I see, the multiple witnesses just make it so hard for me to in any way think that he had anything to do with it. And the kids who were with him that night have always said he had nothing to do with it. It's one of the first things when speaking with Amanda that I got was that she was very confident that I was with my dad and my dad had nothing to do with it. And there was a weird family dynamic there. She's not close. The children here are not close with Deborah's family side, Deborah's mom's side, and have not been for a really long time since this took place, really. I think they spent like one Christmas together after Deborah's murder and then kind of cut ties since then. So it's been a weird dynamic since then. But they've always, in everything I've talked to, they've been very confident that it's not him in any way. And as far as I can tell, law enforcement cleared him right off the bat. So I just think it's really easy for us to go, as likely as it could sound in some cases, this one doesn't really make sense.
I can see, though, where someone would assume it would be the spouse or the ex-spouse because it was so personal. I can see how someone would assume it had to have been someone she knew, someone close to her, the ex, or a current spouse or boyfriend, with her clothing being taken, with the way that she was murdered. It's so personal. to be stabbed versus a gunshot wound.
Her throat was cut too.
All of those things make me think it's someone so close. Why would she have gone to such a remote location with someone she didn't know?
Why would she get in the car with somebody she didn't know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
So-
the murder itself makes you think it was somebody personal in a lot of ways. She had bite marks on her breast. To me, it said multiple bite marks. I don't know the exact number, but I can tell you multiple means more than one. You know what I mean? So
Right.
that's multiple bite marks on her breast. To me, that's so personal to get that up close to somebody. Even sometimes choking someone, you could do it an arm length away. But to bite, you're literally putting your face into their body. And so that screams personal to me. Her getting in the car with a stranger doesn't really seem likely. So that seems personal to me. But everything about this screams with him, you know?
Agreed.
Yeah. Theory 2, I think that it's pretty obvious that the two suspects seen leaving the Candlewick with her is up pretty high up there. I can see how that would be a main theory in the case for a lot of people. She was seen, in fact, leaving the bar with these guys. It's easy to forget that these two guys were seen leaving with her by multiple witnesses. Multiple people at the bar said these two guys were seen leaving with her. And then shortly, like within a month or two after the murder, they move away out of state. So I can see really quickly how they were the two main suspects for a long time. From 83, basically, all the way up until like 2007, they were the two main suspects. This is who everyone looked at. But the problem that I kind of have with looking at them is, one, I'm pretty sure that since 2007, they haven't really been looked at all. Every newspaper article since then mentions nothing about them. And honestly, I don't think since 2007 they've been looked at as suspects. And Police Chief David James said in the newspaper, if we had a match, we'd have an arrest. And he's referring to DNA. So they've tested the DNA against these two guys, the two suspects. And so I'm not exactly sure what happened in 2007. I know that they started testing some of the DNA in 2003. By 2007, they tested. These guys aren't really talked about ever again. And as far as I can tell in my interviews with witnesses, people connected to law enforcement, people in the case around 2007. And like I said, I actually think this ties into the CJ Cassidy thing that I mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Something that she overheard, something happened. Like I said, I'll figure that out once we figure out exactly what happened. But somehow I think this ties in. So something for sure happened in like 2007 that these two guys are just like totally off the radar.
Okay, so JD, in the case of Jimmy Manning, having so many witnesses confirm his alibi, say, yes, we saw him at this gas station speaking to someone, his kids are there, the witnesses save him, so to speak. In this case, you would think the witnesses, having so many witnesses say they saw her at the Candlewick, they saw her leave with these two guys, you would almost think you could lock it down right there. But we've spoken to multiple witnesses and they just are telling different information. It seems like there's multiple possibilities, all from the same location. We have witnesses from the Candlewick who say she was there past close, which would be what time?
1:30. Yeah, no, I've interviewed, I mentioned this during the story, but I've interviewed, just like the police did, bartenders who worked that night, girls who were dating musicians who played literally played at the place. I've interviewed so many people from the bar directly, and I've interviewed at least two witnesses who claim to have seen Deborah at a table with these two guys, who, by the way, I'm not saying their name yet because I don't even think they're suspects anymore, and police and the newspapers never released their names. So I'm not going to say them on here. I think they're just two dudes who were caught up in the wrong junk. But the witnesses that I talked to were so inconsistent. The cops in the beginning said one of the hardest things about this case was how all these people's stories were so inconsistent, not matching up. We had two people from the bar that night tell me that they know for a fact that Deborah was there till close at 1:30. And actually, one of the guys asked if he could stay a few minutes later to finish his drink. So she started cleaning and sweeping up while him and Deborah were finishing the drink. Okay, that's a good witness statement. She was found at 12:30 by the cop guy, the officer Richard McCall, the off-duty cop. How in the world can she be found at 12:30, but these two witnesses claim I swear, she was here with them till 1:30.
Right. I mean, it's physically impossible. And if you look at the location, even if she was there late, not quite till close, but even if she was there late, It takes a good 15 minutes to get from that bar to the location on 249. It doesn't make sense that you would claim she had to have been there past close when actually an hour before that is when she was discovered.
Yeah, no, and I asked too. I talked to one of the bartenders and I asked her, is it possible that you guys were closing early that night? It was July 4th. You're a bar, but maybe you guys are closing early that night. I swear, both of them promised me and swore up and down, I know for a fact, the owner never would have closed early. We always stayed open till close, and especially on a holiday like the 4th of July, we celebrated. We were a place that people came to in town. We had a group of regulars who came here, and we would have stayed till 1:30. And I even checked with local liquor laws all the way back to make sure that the liquor laws were the same. Because in Missouri, we stopped selling liquor and alcohol at 1:30, so that's when the bars close. I wanted to see, was it the same in 83? It was. The time that we were allowed to stay open till was 1:30 in Missouri. So it doesn't make any sense to me how, and I get why you would follow them as suspects for so long. It's the only witnesses you had. I have 2 witnesses saying these guys left with her. Of course you have to follow that. I just don't feel there's anything, man. Especially at this point, they stopped looking at them. They have, honestly, they tested the DNA. We know they're not a match. Lieutenant James said if we had a match, we'd have an arrest. There's no arrest. So I almost just immediately just want to go, don't think it's them. But they are a theory. They have to be looked at.
Right. It sounded like the perfect fit to have so many witnesses say, we know that this is true. We know this is fact. But just like we mentioned earlier, statistically, it would typically be the spouse. That's the first person you look at. That's the go-to. But how often are eyewitnesses wrong? How often are details remembered wrong, especially over time?
Oh, yeah. And I would look at these 2 guys, too, because theoretically, if they're seen leaving with her, then they're the last people seen alive with her. Oh, man, we know the statistic there in all the other cases we've looked at. The last person to be seen with a person and the first person to find the body. Those 2 you look at. I mean, you almost have to. So I totally get why people would look at those. Like I said, I just think it's one of those things we almost have to throw away. It's almost one of those just go on to the next theory. Jimmy being involved, don't think, to me, it's not as likely. These 2 guys being involved, I think everything kind of looks like it's not too likely. The third theory, really, that comes to me right off the pop is going to be one that I've heard brought up, the stranger off the interstate theory. For you guys not really familiar with the Cape Girardeau area, there's an interstate exit that would lead you straight off Interstate 55 if you're headed northbound. And if you get off that exit and head up into Cape, it literally leads you right to the Candlewick. So if you're traveling north up the interstate and you get off that exit, one of the first buildings you would pass with lighting back in 83 is this really big bar called the Candlewick. Okay, so I've heard it tossed around that it's pretty odd that she's right there off the interstate. She was seen walking off on foot, and it's this close to the interstate, this bar, somebody off the interstate grabbed her. It wasn't one that I've ever liked since the moment I started looking at this case. We've gotten into that a little bit, but, I found out about this case 10, 12 years ago. I've been looking at this case for like 12 years. And every few years I'd get on the newspaper and I'd look for updates, yada, yada, yada. So it's been really personal to me for a long time. Never in the whole time I've been looking at this case have I ever liked the idea that it was a stranger off the interstate. Now, I will tell you, doing research for this podcast, I do have to investigate that. Honestly, I've had that idea brought up more than once, more times than I would like to count. And that's the one reason I'm adding it to this episode. It's not a theory I love, but it's one that I've had multiple people bring up to me. Man, it's really close to the interstate. Somebody off the interstate could have grabbed her. So I had to look at it. I don't love it still, but I will tell you there's more merit to it than it sounds. There is a large percentage of cases to where if someone goes missing within 5 miles in an interstate exit of it being related to the interstate. It's a huge amount. It really blew me away. Also, during my investigation, we came across what I at least feel is good circumstantial stuff. There is a guy, a serial killer by the name of Tommy Lynn Sells, that I'm looking into really hard for this right now. This guy, for you guys who've never heard his name, go to Google and look this guy up, Tommy Lynn Sells. He's a wicked bad dude. Not nearly as well known as like your Ted Bundys or your, BTKs and whatnot, but sicko, man. This guy's rough. Bad news. This guy, it has Missouri roots, ironically, and was in the area around the time she was killed. He's in Arkansas living with family, right? And this weird thing. He tries to like rape his mom, and she kicks him out. And so he's homeless and he's hitchhiking, I guess, up the interstate, right? And he ends up passing through Cape, confirmed he was here shortly after Deborah was murdered, shortly before, confirmed through the Southeast Missouri in the newspaper, ironically. And then in July, towards the end of the month, less than a month after Deborah was killed, he commits a now known confirmed murder in St. Louis, north up the interstate, the same direction that he was heading from Arkansas. So I don't love this theory, but it ties back around. There was a car found. Do you remember? Just a few short miles, like 12 miles or something from Deborah?
Right.
Yeah, there was this car found. It was taken from Illinois. Theoretically, he could have came from Arkansas and went to Illinois first, then cut over to Missouri. So I could see that. The car was abandoned. It was stolen. And this guy did a lot of the same kind of things that were done to Deborah. He was well known for being a throat cutter. He was well known for abducting women. He was very well known for making stab incisions, stab marks with a knife. He liked strangulation. He was very well known for being a rapist. I have not confirmed at this point whether Deborah was raped. I can only make the assumption that she was, based on the fact that her clothes were taken and ripped off. She was found nude. I don't know necessarily that, but that's my assumption. As a person looking at this, I'm going to infer that makes this a sexual assault of some sort. I feel a sexual nature involved in this. I really do. The bite marks on the breast, I feel a sexual nature involved. So I think it's likely she probably was, but this guy did a lot of those same kind of things. So when I got into this and I found this guy, I'm like, whoa.
It's interesting. And it does, I mean, I feel like you could kind of convince me. You could almost convince me about it being a stranger. But logistically, it doesn't make sense to me. If you're headed northbound on 55, yeah, the Candlewick's a great, convenient spot to pick someone up.
Exactly.
You're right by the river, though. You're right by the Mississippi River. It's right there. You're 10 minutes from crossing state lines to get into Illinois, to be away from you committing a crime.
That's a really
get out of state.
That's a really good point. Cape Girardeau, where the Candlewick is located, I bet it's less than a 7-minute drive to get to the river.
Absolutely. It's super close.
You wouldn't even have to be from this area to know that.
But then why would her body was found southwest off of County Road 249? It's super remote. It's not something that you're going to drive by. You're not going to see that right off of the interstate. If you got off 55 at the Scott City exit to head to Chaffee, you still wouldn't pass by County Road 249. We've driven it. You have to be looking for it, especially at night when you don't have Google Maps back in the 80s. This is a remote location. Logistically, if you're headed from Arkansas up towards the St. Louis area, why would you stop in Cape Girardeau and then backtrack completely off of the interstate to Chaffee, which we know is at a minimum another 12 miles, so 15 plus minutes in the dark?
Yeah, no, bro. You're totally right. I totally get it. The idea that a stranger would know this county road is pretty baffling to me. I thought about that too. It's the one thing that always kind of felt off to me. I've been to this county road. You've been to this county road. A lot of people don't know this, but my dad actually lived very close to this county road. So as a kid, I lived literally half a mile from the spot that Deborah was found at. I didn't know about it at that time. My parents didn't live there in '83 when it happened, but I know the area well. Dude, you have to be from here to know that road. I would have never found that road if I wasn't from this area. You have to be literally from Chaffee or Delta almost to in any way know where that road is. And I just don't know how, if you're a stranger, and you're absolutely right too, picking somebody up, you're gonna head north. You're gonna keep going the direction you're going with the body.
Continue your route.
Yeah, you're not gonna backtrack and waste some time. But if I'm this guy, if I'm Tommy Lynn Sells and I pick this girl up at Candlewick and I've got her and I'm panicking, not to mention, by the way, that he's by himself, I think, at this time period in life. We've talked about it before during the story, but police have always assumed it's two suspects because of the location of her clothes being thrown out. I know there's other reasons, but that's a big part of it. The way they're thrown out along the right-hand side of the road, this guy was by himself. So that part right there alone kind of gives me the, whatnot. But even if this guy decides he's going to do something like that, he picks her up at the Candlewick and he's like, let's find a county road somewhere. Let's find a secluded spot. First off, the river is a perfect dumping spot. That's amazing. I hadn't even said that yet, but yeah, let's go directly 7 minutes this way to the river. but maybe this guy needs a little private time. He wants to find a country road, a gravel road. Oh my gosh. It would be hard for me to keep track of how many country, dark, secluded spots I would find between the location of the bar Candlewick Lounge and County Road 249.
Well, it's also something to think about. Right now, we can get on Google Maps and we can see how many buildings are on a particular road. So we can look and see, we could find a prime spot to commit a crime just by looking in 10 seconds on a map and see who's there. You would have to have been from the area, to me, or someone who drove through the area frequently to know that at the time there was one house on County Road 249. Deborah wasn't from the area. She wouldn't have known about a great spot to drive out to be alone in Chaffee. That's not where she was from.
Yeah. So say it's a stranger hitchhiking. She was walking. Say she leaves the Candlewick. Like those two guys. Say she did leave with those two guys, but all it was they left at the same time. Maybe they both walked out the door at the same time. That's possible. They think they left together. They didn't. They just walked out at the same time. Deborah's walking, and Tommy Lynn Sells or a stranger picks her up hitchhiking. She's not going to know this county road and be like, hey, I know this great spot we can go to hang out. What? No, she's not going to know this spot. Nobody knows this spot. I'm telling you, it's so remote out there, Danny. And we went out there, and from my dad's house, you could hear the train track going over. It's so, you could scream, you'd never hear anything. Nobody for miles would be able to hear it. Now, there was the house there that's not that far, but they're inside a van. And so if she's to the point, like, if they did most of the work inside the van and then just kind of opened the door and threw her out, at that point, she's going to be, we're taking it as an assumption there, but she's going to be in a weakened state. She's not going to be doing a lot of screaming anyway, so the house might not have heard her. But even if she got the chance to yell, I don't think anybody's going to hear it. It's so remote out there. And just the idea to me that some stranger backtracks from Cape to this location to find a spot to dump a body makes absolutely no sense to me at all.
It would be much more convenient to either cross over into Illinois. The river's right there. If you continue heading north, there's the quarry. Once you get up towards St. Louis, Festus, Crystal City, it just doesn't make sense to me to backtrack. And then if you even look at coming from the opposite direction, let's say it's a stranger on the interstate coming south. They're headed south. Then the bar wouldn't be one of the first things you come across. And it's still quite a ways to get over to County Road 249.
Yeah, no, I have thought about the south direction too, because no, it wouldn't be one of the first bars you'd come across, but if you got off the first Cape exit, which would the Jackson exit, it comes and takes Kings Highway down, it would be one of the last buildings you would see leaving town if you were headed to that next exit. So like, say you had a map, back in the 80s, we didn't have cell phones and stuff, you had a map, it would have said, to get to Cape Girardeau, get off this exit, that's the first one they see, they take it, they go, and coming down Kings Highway, they get something to eat, they stop and get some food, now they're leaving to get back on the interstate. That bar would literally be the last lit building they would see on their way out of town to get on the interstate. Now, that's not the interstate route I would have picked, but I don't think that the Interstate 55 exit was there yet, right there by the Cape Walmart. So the south exit, I get it. You could be coming from the south. It's the last thing you see. But how do you get from the Candlewick to that road? That's the one that gets me, because even if you get south on the interstate, it takes you nowhere near that road. You're only going past the Candlewick a mile and a half, and you're at the exit to the interstate. How you would then pass that exit, start heading southwest, and somehow find this road, I get coincidences happen. I really do, but I'm also big into odds. I'm big into numbers. I'm big into looking at patterns. It does not fit for me. It could happen. Is it possible? I don't like it at all.
I also just imagine, let's say you did come across County Road 249 just by fate. It just happens. You just roll up on County Road 249. That's where you decide to commit a crime. In the dark, unless you're familiar with the area, you're not fumbling with a map, especially if you've just committed a crime. Your adrenaline is up. Your mind is racing. Do you really remember how to backtrack your steps to get back onto 55 from there? You would, I believe you would have to be familiar with the area. It's not right off the interstate, a straight shot and then straight back. You've made multiple turns. You've come off of multiple roads to get to County Road 249.
Yeah, actually, what's funny about that too is the road that her clothes were found on was Highway EE. which is parallel to 25. So 25, 249, County Road 249 is basically a farm road that connects EE and 25. Her clothes were actually found on EE. EE technically heads towards the interstate, but it in by no way would have been the way they would have came, and it's not the way that you would leave to get there if you're in a hurry. It actually heads towards Chaffee, okay, which is like this small town, which is close to where she was found, but you would never head towards Chaffee to get to the interstate, is what I'm saying. So it makes it even more illogical that somebody would have been coming from the interstate, get her, take her to this spot, and then head back to the interstate. Well, they didn't head back to the interstate, at least not in the intelligent way. Her clothes were literally found headed towards Chaffee, which another one of those things that doesn't make sense if it's a stranger off the interstate.
So I know I've been saying it couldn't have been a stranger off the interstate that just happened upon it. Let's say it's premeditated and they just picked someone at random. If it was premeditated, you would have picked the most direct route. What's going to be the fastest? Because it is possible it's a railroad area. That's super common here. We know that there's a set of railroad tracks that crosses 249.
Maybe her body was found literally like 100 feet from railroad tracks. No joke.
So it's possible that maybe they weren't familiar with the area as far as all of the roads. What if they knew it by the railroad tracks? What if they knew it by the train routes? They could have been someone from out of town. They could have come through the train routes all the time, and they could have known, because this has a crossing. They've got to slow down. They're on the train. They can kind of scout the area. They could have seen that this was a really remote location, didn't take the most direct route by road because they don't know the area super well, but maybe they were familiar enough to know about the location, to know it was remote, but didn't take the smartest route.
Yeah, no, you're in a panic and you just take off, you dump the body, you just take off down the road, and you know if you head that general direction, it takes you towards the interstate. Because like I said, you can take EE towards Chaffee and then take a left back on 25 and take you to the interstate. So you could get there going that direction. And I can see, I guess, in a panic, you just threw this body out the door, you take off, you throw the clothes out the window on the right side, headed towards Chaffee, and you get on that 25 back towards the interstate. I just don't love it, man. Well, the randomness of that fits, though, too. There are parts of this case that you mentioned earlier that feel so personal. The fact that all these things happen to her feels so personal. But there are parts of this to me that feel so random. If you take away the fact that she was supposedly seen with these two guys, the fact that she was last seen walking just down the road, that's random. There's reasons it could have been a stranger off the interstate. There's reasons it might not have been a stranger off the interstate. I just don't think it was. For me, it's not a huge likely scenario. Ironically, because we have to have three scenarios, and we've said this one probably isn't that likely to all three so far. But to me, it's harder for me to buy into it, man. That's why this case has never been solved. 38 years later, this case has never been solved. We just don't know, man. All of these scenarios and theories look likely, but then you can list 100 reasons why every one of the three so far look unlikely. The stranger on the interstate theory looks unlikely to me because of the location. That same location makes my next theory kind of likely. So one that's going to get you here, and I can already tell you, but I have to say it, one that gets me is the cop, the off-duty cop, Richard McCall was his name. He finds her on this county road at like 12:30 at night. Now, the reason it's odd to me, think about this, it's 4th of July, bro. Like, what are you doing at 12:30 at night on a county road? He was there with his brother, I think. What are you doing on a county road at 12:30 at night, just cruising around on the 4th of July? Like, what are you doing?
Cruising around. That's exactly what you're doing. It's 4th of July. It's a holiday. You get to do whatever you want.
Yeah, bro, it's 12:30 at night and two guys are just out driving around and such. I don't know. It gives me the heebies because I'm like, look, he's an off-duty cop. First off, he gets there, sees her, him and his brother see her, and he makes the statement, something to the effect like, my brother wanted to stop and help, but I wanted to leave and go back and get help because we didn't have any way of defending ourselves. I'm like, dude, you're a cop, bro. You're a cop. And you find a body on the side of a road in a place that, honestly, I think it's weird that you're there a little bit at that time on a holiday. Like, why? The guy has kids. He has a wife. Where's your family? It's the 4th of July. I don't know. I have a hard time with that. What are you doing there? We talked about how remote this location is. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's in the boonies. This guy is an off-duty Chaffee cop. The clothes are found and headed towards Chaffee. a person from Chaffee would know this road, right?
Well, I think if you look at the times, you have to look at it as a police officer in the 80s. It's not the same. Their job duties are not quite the same. Their life is not the same as it is now. And it's a holiday. It's July 4th. It's, of course, your time. It's summer. You're feeling patriotic. Of course, you want to cruise around. The weather was nice. You got the windows down. You're listening to the radio. You're out with your brother.
It's 83. They're probably out like shooting road signs and stuff.
All kinds of things you could be doing. So I don't think it's that weird. And if you're a local to the area, you're going to know all the roads. You're just driving around doing whatever. I don't think it's that weird to be out there if you're a local. Looking at the other theories, it is weird. Jimmy Manning wouldn't have known the area. Deborah wouldn't have known the area. So a stranger off the interstate, then it is super remote. But if you're a local, it's not like that road is super hidden where no one would know where it is. It is remote in the perspective of it being someone to just happen to go out there, but it's not that remote or that crazy for through traffic from EE to 25.
I think it is a little out there, but if you're headed out at Chaffee, you kind of have to know this spot. And I always had a problem with it. You know, how did they know this road? How did they know this road? Okay, I will tell you, if you travel from Chaffee and you come down 25 and connect it, it is literally the cruise spot. The high school kids, that's literally the cruise spot. It's just a big circle. So it loops from 25 to 249 to EE back to Chaffee. Or if you were from Delta, it's the cruise strip for the high school kids there. You take 25 up, take it to EE, take 249 to 25 back to Delta. So it literally is a cruise trip. So I do think it's odd. Like, honestly, I've never been out at 12:30 on the 4th of July, morning July 5th now with my brother. Just out doing stuff. I don't know. What are they, rabbit hunting? I don't know. What are you doing? They said they didn't have any way to defend themselves. So I guess they're not doing that. They're not shooting road signs. I told you they didn't have a gun. So
that's true.
You know what I'm saying? So I have a hard time with the idea of buying that like he's involved or anything. But I do find it a little catchy. I find it odd that he's at there at that time of night. I find it weird that they find the body and leave. I find it really odd. Now he did make the comment, he did make.
I don't think that's as weird because, number one, if you're driving around for fun, you guys are having a chat, who knows what they were doing out there? But if you're driving around with your brother and you come upon a body in 1983 in Chaffee, in a small town area, you're not seeing that every single day.
No, I will say.
You're definitely not. Of course you're spooked. You don't know how long it's been since a body ended up there. Are they 2 minutes away from a killer or 2 hours away? I can understand not wanting to stop. There's not streetlights out there. You can't see anything but what's in your headlights. You wouldn't know if someone was out in one of the fields to your left or to your right.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say too is in my head, I think when I say like this cop found a body and left because he didn't have a way to fend himself, he's scared. I think in my head, I'm seeing like Colin Farrell from the movie SWAT. With like, he comes running in and he's got guns blazing. That's not what this was. It was 83 and Chaffee's like this little town. Honestly, he may have been like a volunteer deputy. He may not even been a real cop. Like what I think of as a cop, he may have been like a volunteer dude. So like he's out cruising. So I'm like, in my head, I'm seeing him and his brother like joyriding in the patrol car. He's probably in his personal vehicle. He's probably out cruising. It's 4th of July. His family's gone to bed. And he's like, he calls his brother. He's like, hey man, let's drink some brewskis and cruise. I don't like the fact that, but once again, here's another thing. He's the one who found her body. Dude, do you know how crazy it is that she was found less than 2 hours after she went missing? Like 2 to 3 hours between her being missing and her being found. He's the one who finds her. Once again, coincidental, really coincidental. But in a lot of cases, statistics show first and last person to be around somebody or first person to find the body. And I mentioned that earlier. The first person to find a body, sometimes the killers return to the scene. Sometimes the killers... there's nothing to show that here. This guy, for instance, McCall, it doesn't look like he retired as a cop or anything. From everything I can find in his obituary, it actually says he retired from a cabinet place, which is why I said he may have been a volunteer deputy. I don't even know he's a real cop because in his obituary, it doesn't even mention he was ever a cop. So I'm thinking he's probably a volunteer deputy of some sort. Doesn't work out to where he's like, man, this isn't my thing. Goes on and has a nice career with a family. He has kids. Well, I know he divorces later, but I can't find anything crazy with that. I don't have a police record on him, no arrest. So I don't feel that there's any meat to it necessarily. I just still hate it. Like, bro, what are you doing on this county road? I don't know.
I get it. It's kind of one of those things though where, how often do you say like, oh, I was in the right place at the right time, that we just happened to be able to do this. You know, there's the wrong place, wrong time thing. I mean, that's an unfortunate evening.
Some
Or
people
morning, I guess
Morning.
you would say. That's a terrible start to the day. Wrong place, wrong time, that you happened upon this,
People do win the lottery. People also get hit by a train.
right?
It happens. Rare coincidences do pop up.
So I know you said, like, as soon as you hear his profession at the time, you see him a certain way. You see him dressed as an officer in a patrol car with a gun and a badge.
That's the visual I have. Yeah,
That's what you see when you say he's a police officer,
an off-duty cop founder.
even if he's off duty. That's how you see. But think about what were his job duties at the time. You can have a police officer that stays in the station, and then you've got officers that are out patrolling.
Yeah.
He may not have been a patrol guy. Maybe he hadn't
yeah.
been. Maybe he didn't feel super confident using a gun.
I told you he might have been a volunteer. You're right. I
Could've
told you
been.
he might have been a volunteer cop. He may not even been I get it. I'm not saying I love him for it. I'm not saying he's like my main dude. I'm just saying I think it's sus that he's out there. I don't like it. He has the opportunity. He was there. He's the last person to find her. He lives in the area. He has roots the area. It's just one of those things. If I have to say now that, these are my four main theories. Yeah. To me right now, from all the research that we've done, we've been working on this case hard for 3 months at least. I mean, obviously I said I've been looking at it for 12 years. I've not been working on this case for 12 years. I just have kept up with it. The very first time I heard about it, it got me, and I've been checking into it ever since. But we've put like 3 months of hard work into this so far. Not just getting the podcast ready, but this specific case. And I found nothing to really push me in any direction other than these four theories, though. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not saying it has to be one of these four, but I would bet you that by the time we're done, and that's another big thing we haven't talked about with this case. This is a little different than some of the other cases we're going to do. Most of our cases are going to be quicker, rundown episodes where we're just trying to get the word out about this case. We're trying to tell their story. We're trying to make sure that people remember what happened to these girls. But we don't know necessarily that it's going to do anything, that it's going to help, that it's going to reach people. That's what we're hoping for. We hope that we can build an audience. This case is different. We have been sunk so deep in this case. I can't tell you how many people I've interviewed for on this case. How many, I guarantee you it's in the hundreds of hours I've spent talking to people on this case. This will be a different one because we're going to do an update episode. I'm finding out things right now as we're recording this episode that, I can't confirm it yet. It's just kind of whispers at this point, but I'm like, what? So I'm telling you, this is not a dead investigation. This is not something that, Lieutenant David James made a comment in the paper at one point about, we just don't have the time to work this case every single day. It's a cold case. I know they don't, but it's not a dead case to them either. I promise you guys, if somebody calls in to the Cape County Sheriff's Department with information, I promise you it is going to get checked. It is going to get investigated. And I also promise you that we're not done investigating. I made a post on Facebook about this on social media, but I said, if you're involved in this case and we have not spoken to you yet, we will. I will speak to every person involved in this case at one point or another. It's going to happen. We will run you down. I am very good at research. I will find you through the newspaper. Genealogy stuff is awesome. Ancestry.com will rock your world. So I will figure you out. And I don't know exactly when we'll get to the update episode. Like I said, I'm finding out some new things now, but it's going to take us a little bit to get to that point. But right now, at this point in the episode, these are the four that really get me. I think it's weird that Officer Richard McCall was there that night at the time. I think it's a little odd, the location, So I think it's odd that it could be a stranger off the interstate. Okay. But we can't discount that theory either. She just completely vanished. If the witnesses from the Candlewick aren't very reliable, saying that they saw her with these two guys, then it becomes something that's really random. And it could very well be the interstate theory. I don't necessarily think that the two guys who were seen leaving with her are great suspects anymore. And I think the fact that the police aren't looking at them actively right now also means they said we don't have a match with DNA. So I think it kind of knocks them out, but it could still be them. This is 83. They've lost a lot of evidence in this case. I'm not going to get too far into that right now. We'll do that in the update episode, but there's a lot of stuff that it's 83. They didn't know. I'm not saying it's negligence on purpose, but there's a lot of stuff missing here, but we have DNA. Maybe it's not the right guys. So the fact that I don't think it was these two guys and the cops don't anymore, it still could be. And just the same with, and I hate to circle back to it, but just the same with the spouse, the ex, Jimmy Manning. I hate that theory. I think there's nothing to it. We just can't 100% at this time say, no, it wasn't him. None of these theories can we close. None of these theories can we say, this is the main one. But I will bet you, when this is all said and done, the person that we come to an agreement that we think it was, the theory that we think, I think it's going to fit in here. I really do. And I bet a lot of money on that. I think that we are really close. And they call it a circle sometimes in this, but I think our person is in our circle, our person or our people. I buy into the fact that it was two people. Maybe only one committing the crime itself, but I do buy into that there was two people that night. I could be sold otherwise, but I'm sold right now on the fact that it was two people. I think we will end up finding out who that name is, who those names are. I am 100% confident of it because I won't stop. I will not stop on this case until it's done. So we will put out an update episode about this and just kind of see where it goes from there. But this is where I'm at. I think that right here, we're on the right track.
And, we've put the time and research into this, and we appreciate other perspectives. You don't always think in the direction I think. I don't always think in the direction that you think. And we have an entire community out there who may listen to what we've put out here and may say, actually, I know something about the area in 1983 where what you said doesn't make sense. And we want that feedback. If you know something or you have a perspective where you say it could be something completely different, we want to know. We want to be able to look into that.
Oh, yeah. If you know something about this case, I told you, I just got done saying it. This case is still being investigated. If not actively every day by the police, I promise actively every day by us. We're not professional investigators, but we have a team that we're working with who have a lot of experience in what we do. The people that we've put together to make this podcast possible have so many years of experience in doing exactly this thing right here. So I will tell you, if you know something about this case, please reach out to Cape Girardeau Sheriff's Department. Reach out to them. If you don't want to call the cops, reach out to us. I'll give you my personal cell. No, I'm not going to do that. But I will give you, reach out to us, crimetalkradiopod@gmail.com. Reach out to us on Facebook. If you think you know something about this case in any way, big or small, there was a witness who saw a vehicle on 249 that night. There's a house on the corner, right? There was a witness who saw a vehicle stopping and going that night. She came home from work. She was living with her parents. She came home from work. About the timing, I guess, she got off work. She saw a vehicle. If you're that person, reach out to us. I mean, you don't have to, but it'd be cool. We'd like to talk to you. I told you, if you don't reach out to us, we'll talk to you eventually anyway. How's it going? We will talk to everyone, but reach out to us. If you know something about this case, reach out to law enforcement. Reach out to us. Even the tiniest little thing could help solve this case. Danielle, in my gut, I fully believe that this case is solvable. I believe it's going to be solved someday. And I believe that it will get solved probably by somebody hearing this or seeing one of our billboards that are going to go up, our flyers, whatever it may be. It'll be someone coming forward and finally giving us a piece of information. I 100% believe right now, and well, that's a silly way to word it. I don't believe it. I know it to be fact. I know to be fact that the Cape Girardeau Sheriff's Department is literally one phone call away from closing this case. They are one email away, one witness statement away. I believe that witness to still be alive, but I believe they are one statement away from closing this case and making either an arrest or closing the case and giving a family closure that it needs. So if you have information, don't think that because this crime happened in 83 that it's useless at this point. There's no reason to come forward.
It still matters.
It still matters. She was a person. Yeah, Deborah was a person, and her family's still alive. Amanda, Brandon, and Rodney live with this every day. They still have to live with the fact that they never got to find closure, and they don't know what happened to their mom. I don't know that even finding out the who would be enough. I want them to know the why. Why did somebody take their mom from them? Why didn't they have a mom to help them? To me, it sounds like Jimmy did a great job raising them, and he had to raise them as a single father. And why did he have to do that alone? Why didn't they get to have a mom? And so to me, that's a big thing. And if you have any information that can help us bring that kind of closure to this family, please, it's been long enough. I say it on the website and I say it in social media all the time. If you know something, say something. Someone knows something, someone needs to say something. Right now, there's someone out there who's going to hear this, or you know someone and you're going to hear this that knows something about this case. You have to say something. You have to say something, please. All right, so we've gone over 4 main theories in the case. Danny, anything else you can think of off the top of your head that rings out, things that I haven't gone over, theories that I haven't brought up?
I'm in agreement with you though. I truly believe that someone out there knows something, heard something, saw something, even if it's second or third hand. This is a small community.
Oh, you
This
heard a
is an
rumor.
area.
Okay.
Yes, let's say you know someone who said that they saw something.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Anything like that can point us in a new direction. Law enforcement can look at maybe a new angle because we have new information, whether it's right or wrong. The more avenues you have, the more information you're going to end up with.
Oh, yeah.
Even if it's a rabbit trail of sorts.
Oh yeah,
You know what I'm
no,
saying?
I know, absolutely. A lot of these things end up looking like rabbit trails until you get to the end and it gets solved. So even if it sounds like some rumor you heard, something you're like, oh well, it's no way it can be helpful for this case. It can be helpful for the case. There's so many things that can be helpful for this case. I told you, I really think it's one phone call away, one email away, one tip away from blowing the lid off of this case. And they're going to do something. Somebody's going to do something. They're going to have to. I'm putting billboards up. We're going to put flyers out. People in this town, if you have not heard the name Deborah Manning, you're going to. If you haven't seen Deborah's face, you are going to see her face. We are going to make sure that people are going to know her name and they are going to know her story. And they're going to know that she was one of us, guys. This isn't a story that happened in California. This isn't something that happened to somebody in Florida somewhere. This literally happened in Cape Girardeau. If you're local to here, then you'll understand the emphasis in my voice right now and why I'm talking so passionately about this. This was a local, guys. This is someone from our local community. Even though it happened in 1983, she still deserves for at least someone out there to tell her story and for people to remember her name. Yeah, no, I think that's a wrap, though, guys. I want to say thank you so much for listening to Crime Talk Radio. This has been our first episode. We were so excited. You guys keep staying awesome. If you know anything, get on the site, get on the Facebook, get on Cape Girardeau Sheriff's Department, get on their website. If you know anything, say something. Somebody out there knows something. Somebody out there needs to say something. Thank you guys so much for listening. This has been Crime Talk Radio. Remember, we will never stop talking until all of their stories are told.
We will continue to keep you informed as this story unfolds.
This has been an Audio Tiger production.